What is up, guys, and welcome back to the channel. So today's video is about Merged Zamasu. Now, Merged Zamasu is a super cool character in my opinion. Zamasu himself has a lot of layers to his character that a lot of people overlook, but without further ado, let's just get right into it. So I'm actually going to start this video off talking about the fight between Hit and Goku, because a lot of people don't realize this, but the fight between Hit and Goku is actually extremely important to the Goku Black arc. And the reason for that is because Zamasu is an anti-Goku in the sense that his entire ideology, everything he represents, is a representation of the dangers of the ego in Budo. And so Zamasu is what I would consider an anti-Budo character. Now, Budo, as I've established in previous videos, is the concept that Roshi taught Goku at a very young age, and it essentially not only embodies all of Goku's personality traits as an actual representation of martial arts — Goku literally is martial arts — but it's also a very, very important aspect of the series to understand the intentions behind all of the decisions Akira Toriyama, Toyotaro, and different people who work on the series make. Not just that, but the fight between Hit and Goku is actually what causes him to come to the conclusion he does about Goku, ironically. And you'll understand why this is ironic after I explain it. So if you'll remember, in the fight between Hit and Goku, especially in the manga, we get this really blatant homage to whenever Roshi fought Tien in the original Dragon Ball, and at the end of the fight, he purposely gives up, walks off stage, and this has a profound effect on Tien as a character. And Goku giving up against Hit is essentially him practicing Budo. It's the practice of taming the ego, taming the need to be superior, taming the need to be more powerful, essentially successfully practicing martial arts. And this is the thing that Goku does that has a significant impact on every single character that he runs into. Now, we get direct evidence of this in the form of Hit immediately letting Monaka knock him out of the ring, allowing Universe 7 to be victorious in the battle between Universe 6 and Universe 7. It's an extremely important scene in the sense that it causes an extremely large set of events in the series. Not only does it cause Goku Black, Zamasu, etc., it's also the cause for Zeno to want to have the Tournament of Power. They specifically and literally state this in the anime, but the entire point of the Tournament of Power was to see if any of the universes had enough virtue to restore the rest of the universes, and if they didn't, they would erase all the universes. What Zeno sees from Goku in this fight between Hit allowed him to realize that not only is fighting extremely entertaining, but also that mortals, due to the practice of martial arts and Budo, had the potential to use it to essentially accelerate mortal development. And this is something that's extremely looked over in this early section of Dragon Ball Super. A lot of people don't catch on to this, and it's an extremely important aspect of Dragon Ball Super as a whole. If you don't catch on to this, there's tons of things that you won't catch on to later. And we get direct evidence of Goku's significance as an example of mortal development due to his interaction with Zeno. Now, something very important to understand about mortal development that is established in the Goku Black arc is that the end goal of mortal development is enlightenment. And this is extremely ironic because when Zamasu is watching Hit fight Goku, he's literally missing out on a literal example of enlightenment within the context of martial arts, and he just completely overlooks it and instead gets upset because Goku is more powerful than him. He also blatantly states that the end goal of mortal development is enlightenment whenever he's looking over the Barbary, because he thinks that the Barbary will never be capable of finding enlightenment. And then Goku shows up with a gi that literally says enlightenment on the back of it, tries to give Zamasu a example of the concept of Budo, and Zamasu just completely overlooks it and disregards it and takes it for granted. Now, what is enlightenment within the context of Dragon Ball? Well, Goku is enlightenment within the context of Dragon Ball. And what I mean by that is Goku's pure heart is enlightenment within the context of Dragon Ball, which is why Goku and Zeno get along, and this has been stated on the official Dragon Ball website that the reason they get along is because they are both pure of heart. So essentially the end goal of mortal development is purity of heart, which is why the Kaioshin try to guide mortals to purity of heart, and the Makaioshin create pure evil beings. They create beings that are pure evil, and that is the end goal of each aspect of mortal development, which is expanded on heavily in this arc. Now, one heavily discussed subject when it comes to martial arts is the dangers of the ego. I talk about it all the time in my videos, and one of the greatest examples of this we've gotten in Dragon Ball is the opening fight between Zamasu and Kibito during the Goku Black arc. This scene is actually purposely crafted to mirror the fight between Goku and Hit, and this is something else that a lot of people don't catch on to, but you'll actually notice this, that Zamasu is constantly praised due to the fact that he is a prodigy as a martial artist, and due to that, his ego is constantly stoked as a martial artist, and due to that, he feels a sense of superiority. Now, due to his sense of superiority, he feels like he is justified in his action, which is why he just completely wrecks Kibito and has no mercy on him, because he feels justified in his actions as a martial artist because of his skills. And this is a very, very important personality trait to establish for Zamasu going into the Goku Black arc that a lot of people overlook. This is purposely there to essentially mirror Zamasu and Goku. Zamasu is an example of a martial artist who does not practice martial arts correctly. Despite the fact that Zamasu is pure of heart, which we will get to soon, he has an ego issue. He has an identity issue. And the main thing that holds us back as martial artists is the obsession we have with our own progress and how that progress affects our standing as a martial artist. We essentially want to use martial arts as a way of attaining fame, fortune, being more powerful than our opponents in order to feel superior to them, things of that nature. All of that stuff is essentially anti-Budo. It's anti-martial art. So something a lot of people overlook about this scene with the Barbary is the Barbary are essentially a stand-in for the Saiyans, because the Saiyans were just like the Barbary in the sense that they were barbarians. They were also unnaturally aggressive, and so they're not using Saiyans here because that would be too blatant, but they do make a slight reference to this being a representation of Saiyan society in the form of this character right here dragging a fish behind him, exactly like Goku in the original Dragon Ball. This is essentially to signify they are associating the Barbary with what Goku would have been had he never experienced mortal development in the form of his influence from Grandpa Gohan after having his original identity as Kakarot destroyed after falling and hitting his head. He developed a new nature, an enlightened nature, due to the fact that he was raised by Grandpa Gohan. And so the Barbary are being used as a stand-in for a hypothetical scenario where essentially Goku never hit his head, and that's essentially what Zamasu is looking at here and being disgusted by, is pre-Goku. Basically like Bardock and the Saiyans prior to Goku. Goku is an example of a pure-hearted Saiyan. So essentially Zamasu is looking down here at an example of what the Saiyans used to be pre-development, and Goku is an example of what they are post-development, which is why when he shows up, it's so important because, and again, there's tons of things that are overlooked about this arc, but this is another one of those very important things to understand. The reason those scenes are lined up the way they are with each other is because they are purposely having you see something very reminiscent to what Goku used to be prior to his development, and then immediately cutting to an example of proper mortal development within the context of Dragon Ball. When people think mortal development, they think like super advanced, super intelligent species of like super aliens. No. Dragon Ball is an allegory for martial arts and essentially enlightenment, and the peak of mortal development or evolution within the context of Dragon Ball is someone like Goku, someone who has attained a pure heart within the context of what martial arts itself considers enlightenment, which only exists due to the fact that the concept of enlightenment in Buddhism and Taoism had a significant impact on martial arts as a whole. And so martial arts conceptually has a lot of things going on for it that are just an extension of what Taoism and Buddhism taught and the effect that those teachings had on martial arts. So when I say enlightenment within the context of martial arts, the reason I say that is because Budo specifically is a Japanese martial art that is very, very heavily influenced by the teachings of Buddhism and Taoism. It's essentially just an extension of the effect that Buddhism and Taoism had on Kung Fu in China way, way, way back. So Toriyama is playing on that here. That's the reason the terms enlightenment and moral development and things like that are being thrown around so much, is because essentially because Dragon Ball is an allegory for martial arts and martial arts is rooted rooted in those philosophies, Toriyama has chosen to play on that in Dragon Ball, and has from the very beginning. Now, the series immediately, and I love this so much, give us another example of how Zamasu is an anti-Goku. And what I mean by that is, so when Goku kills someone, right, and this is something that's talked about a lot in the series because people question Goku's morality because he does kill sometimes, but one of the teachings of Budo is to kill your opponent instantly if they are causing trouble without any malicious intentions. The entire concept of Budo is centered around not allowing your heart's effect on your mind to affect your conscious thoughts, because your heart is an extension of your ego and your survival instincts, and that will cause you to have malicious intentions in situations like this where your life is in danger if you don't have any control. And what Dragon Ball itself is thoroughly against is the idea of enjoying consciously, within the context of your conscious thoughts, murdering people or killing people. And Goku does not do that. When he kills someone, he doesn't do it for self-gratification. He does it because it's a life or death situation, and it's sort of an instinctual action on his part. He's sort of killing in a state of no-mindedness. Goku himself as a character conceptually plays on the concept of no-mindedness throughout the entire series because he's a representation of the idea of enlightenment within the context of martial arts. Ultra Instinct is not where that started. That has been an essential aspect of Goku's character from the very, very beginning. And so this scene here where Zamasu murders a Barbary and then smiles because he enjoys it, that is yet another example of why Zamasu is a perfect anti-Goku in this sense. Now, there are other things that happen here that signify to us that Goku and Zamasu are a mirroring of each other. Now, Goku, and this is extremely interesting, does the job of a Kai without even trying because of his nature as a martial artist and who he is. So Goku will actually develop mortals to attain a pure heart, which is the job of the Kai, without even trying. Now, all of the things that Gowasu mentions to Zamasu here in terms of like what he should do as a practicing Kai and martial artist, Goku does this without even trying. When Gowasu says you must see this as an effort to balance your heart, you see Goku do this throughout the entire series multiple times. In fact, one of the greatest examples is when Goku became a Super Saiyan. Now, this is extremely interesting for a lot of different reasons, but one of my favorite reasons is this balancing of the heart. You know, it is a representation of the idea of enlightenment within the context of martial arts, but it's also, due to that, a direct reference to who Goku was based on, Sun Wukong, because this balancing of the heart is what Sun Wukong attained when he attained his personal enlightenment. Essentially, Sun Wukong's personal enlightenment in Journey to the West is essentially identical to what martial arts as a concept has came to the conclusion is what they consider enlightenment, again, within the context of martial arts. So, Sun Wukong himself is an allegorical representation of this idea that martial artists adhere to and try to attain when they practice it. He is a literal representation, as the victorious fighting Buddha, the idea of enlightenment within the context of martial arts. That's who Sun Wukong is. So that's very important to establish going into this video moving forward, because there are a crap ton of references to Sun Wukong, as always, moving forward in this art. Now, one commonly overlooked aspect of this speech from Gowasu is this part where he says, our purpose, of course, is to maintain peace. If there is a planet that becomes devoid of peace and disturbs the balance of the universe, we must think of a way they can fix it themselves. This is a direct reference to whenever Kami told Goku, whenever he decided to restore the Dragon Balls due to the existence of Goku, that he believes the mortals should learn to take care of themselves, and that is also the very scene where Kami also explains to us that Goku, in his view, which they're playing on now in Dragon Ball Super, is the ideal character in terms of how he thinks the mortals of Earth should develop. So that is extremely, extremely important here. All of this stuff in terms of what Gowasu is saying to Zamasu is extremely important because it points out just how much Goku and Zamasu mirror each other. This attitude that Zamasu develops as a result of being so egotistical is something that Goku is impervious to. Because he is a master at practicing martial arts and a literal representation of the idea of martial arts, he is essentially immune to falling victim to his sense of justice and to his ego the way that Zamasu is here. And that's the reason that the characters mirror each other so well. And it's an extremely important aspect of the plot of Dragon Ball. Anytime you see Goku being tempted to pull something that Zamasu would, essentially, like giving into his sense of justice and a personal idea of morals or something like that, which is again anti-martial arts in nature. When he resists the urge to do that, it creates good karma for him, and that's the reason he survives and thrives and makes it through all of these extremely high stakes situations throughout the series. Now, another thing they do in this arc to signify to us that Goku is pure of heart, and essentially the concept that I was just speaking of, where he makes these decisions as a practicing martial artist, he practices Budo successfully and then is immediately rewarded, and like that is essentially how the plot functions and what makes Dragon Ball so great. We get an immediate example of this in the form of Goku being given a button by Zeno, which again is used later to completely fix this entire issue. This is a reward for Goku successfully practicing Budo. I've seen so many people complain about the end of the Goku Black arc who do not understand this, but the entire narrative purpose of the Zeno button is a reward for how Goku treated Hit at the end of the Universe 6 versus Universe 7 tournament. Now, in the anime, Goku has a very different effect on Zamasu than he does all the other characters, and this is because Zamasu is very different. There's a scene in both the manga and the anime that signifies that Zamasu is pure of heart, but something about purity of heart in Dragon Ball that people overlook is what exactly it means. Now, the idea of purity of heart within Dragon Ball is something that people tend to misunderstand. It's explained to us back in the original Dragon Ball whenever Goku is established to be pure of heart despite the fact that he wants to practice martial arts. Goku's pure drive to want to better himself as a martial artist and practice martial arts correctly, which is ingrained into his nature, is the reason that he is pure of heart. And as a result, Goku will do selfish things for selfless reasons because he is a representation of the concept of selfless selfishness. Okay, so Goku does selfish things sometimes, and we see this highlighted and talked about throughout the series, but he always does it with a pure heart. Now, Zamasu's intentions, due to the fact that he is a Kai, in his own mind are pure, and this is a very, very important thing about his character that people overlook. Zamasu is in fact pure of heart. Toriyama talked about this at length. He essentially said that Zamasu is so good that it backfired, and so the defining difference between Goku and Zamasu here is that Goku's intentions are pure and Zamasu's are not, and Toriyama has talked about this at length. One of the most misunderstood interviews by Toriyama is this one. It says, "At any rate, I wanted him to have a sense of being that rare guy who seeks only to become stronger than before, so much that it feels like there's no one as pure as this person, and while he does end up saving everyone as a result of that, he himself at least has a very pure sincerity about wanting to become stronger. What I wanted to pick the most was the sense that he might not be a good guy at all, although he does do good things as a result." Toriyama is perfectly conveying to you the concept that I'm talking about here. Essentially, the idea is what makes Goku pure of heart is his dedication to martial arts. Essentially, Goku has been tricked in the sense that his nature has been fine-tuned in a way by Grandpa Gohan to be completely dedicated to practicing the concept of martial arts, which within the concept of Dragon Ball is enlightenment in disguise. But what Toriyama is essentially saying here about Zamasu is that he is so possessed by his idea of what justice and right and wrong is that his actions themselves come from his pure heart. But his pure heart has been corrupted by his obsession with his ego, with his identity, and his conscious thoughts have essentially completely dominated who he is. He's not letting go. He's not doing what Goku does and practicing being an instinctual being, an enlightened being. He is doing the exact opposite. He's letting the effect that his survival instincts, his ego has on his mind completely dominate his conscious thoughts. We see this whenever he kills the Barbary. We see this whenever he's fighting Kibito. We see this whenever he's worried about the mortals surpassing him and, possibly killing him. He is just completely dominated by his ego's effect on his personality. And the reason that Zamasu is a Kai in this sense, and this is just so unbelievably awesome, is because Kai are an example of characters characters who are tested to be pure of heart, so they are naturally enlightened beings. Otherwise, they become Makaioshin, and even then, it's like an evil form of enlightenment. And Goku comes from a barbarous race who's essentially considered the bottom line of moral development. It's the exact opposite of the concept of enlightenment. It's the very, very bottom of the totem pole in terms of moral development, and yet Zamasu slowly falls victim to his ego and becomes more and more like the very beasts that he was judging and overlooking while he was observing the Barbary. He essentially becomes the very thing that he seeks to destroy. A very, very common trope in media, but it's very, very well done here because Goku becomes what Zamasu was supposed to become, and Zamasu becomes what Goku grew from. And it's just such an unbelievably cool concept. I love it so much, and all of that is extremely important within the context of Merged Zamasu. I know it doesn't seem like I've been talking about Merged Zamasu this whole time, but I have. All of this builds up to the existence of Merged Zamasu. Now, if you've watched my Vegito and Gogeta video, you'll know that those two characters are heavily centered around concepts from Journey to the West, and like I talked about at the end of my Vegito video, Merged Zamasu no different. His character development and what he goes through is essentially the antithesis of what Sun Wukong goes through. Also, something I noticed whenever I did my video concerning the Six-Ear Macaque is that a few people tried to convince me that the Six-Ear Macaque was just a shapeshifter. This is not the case. I will put a link to Journey to the West Research's research on this topic. It is a very, very commonly well-known fact that the Six-Ear Macaque is a representation of the idea of Sun Wukong's identity, which he must destroy, suffer an ego death, in order to attain enlightenment. That is the entire purpose of the story between Sun Wukong and the Six-Ear Macaque, is that Sun Wukong needs to experience ego death in order to attain enlightenment and become the victorious fighting Buddha. And what's so important about that is that that feeds into what's happening here with Merged Zamasu. Now, in that story, especially this comic version, which this is the title of this comic that I always use in my videos. I've had people ask me about it multiple times. If you're interested in it, try to find it online. It's really, really awesome. But essentially, in Journey to the West, Sun Wukong has a dream where he is essentially his old self. And his old self is extremely reminiscent of Zamasu. And this will give you an extremely great understanding of what Toriyama was thinking here and why Zamasu is such an unbelievably cool character. But essentially, while Sun Wukong is having this dream, he is up in heaven amongst the gods. He is killing all the gods. He is attempting to take over heaven due to the fact that his warped sense of justice has corrupted him and he has become completely dominated by his ego. And that is verbatim what is happening here with Zamasu. Now, everything that happens with Goku Black's development prior to Merged Zamasu is there to essentially define to you what exactly Zamasu is merging with when he becomes Merged Zamasu. When Goku Black talks about his sense of justice when he becomes a Super Saiyan, which also is a really, really, really cool mirroring of Goku's Super Saiyan transformation from Namek, because Goku became a Super Saiyan due to seeing Krillin be destroyed and his sense of empathy, and Goku Black became a Super Saiyan due to his hatred of mortals and his warped sense of justice when it comes to the concept of mortals. So essentially, Goku became a Super Saiyan due to his empathy for mortals, and Goku Black became a Super Saiyan due to his hatred for mortals. I think that's a ridiculously cool concept. I just wanted to point that out real quick. But everything that happens with Goku Black is essentially to show you the character traits that Zamasu is falling victim to. Something I talked about in my Vegito video is that in Journey to the West, when Sun Wukong attacks Tripitaka, it is symbolic of attacking his new nature that he is developing as a Buddha on the Journey to the West. And Goku Black does the same thing whenever he kills Gowasu. He is essentially discarding part of his nature that he could have developed if he had listened to Gowasu by killing Gowasu, and instead embracing his ego and his vicious nature that he is developing as a result of falling victim to his ego and his survival instincts, which the Saiyans themselves are a literal and allegorical representation of. So when Merged Zamasu is born and Zamasu merges with Goku Black, that is essentially a corrupted version of the character development that Sun Wukong went through in Journey to the West. This almost happened to to Sun Wukong. If Sun Wukong merged with the sixth-ear macaque, rather than destroying his ego and let it completely dominate his nature as a individual, rather than combining who he was as Sun Wukong with his nature as a Buddha, he would have not become the victorious fighting Buddha. He would have become a villain, the most evil character to ever exist in fiction, arguably. If he had allowed the six-ear macaque to completely dominate his personality, rather than accepting his identity and merging it with his new identity, which is essentially what Vegito and Gogeta is, he would have essentially become what Merged Zamasu is. What's important to understand about Goku and Vegeta, which I talked about in my Vegito and Gogeta videos, is that yes, Vegeta does represent an evil element in the fusion, but Goku represents controlling that aspect of your nature and making it your best friend. Sun Wukong is a representation of the idea of the monkey mind, and the monkey mind can be a great enemy when it comes to how it affects your decision-making processes and your personality, but it can also be your best friend if you let it. And that is the entire point of Goku and Vegeta's relationship, is they are an allegorical and metaphorical representation of this idea. And this is a fundamental core aspect of martial arts that is heavily discussed philosophically. It is extremely important to the idea of martial arts. It feeds into so many different aspects of what Dragon Ball is, Ultra Instinct, Goku's character as a whole. And so Zamasu as a concept, Merged Zamasu particularly, really complements Goku's character as a whole. It really brings to light and rubs in your face what exactly Goku is and why he's so important, and just how creative and cool he is as a character. And I hope that this video has helped you gain a new appreciation for Zamasu, Goku Black, Goku, just the Dragon Ball series as a whole. That's really the purpose of my videos. Anyway, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.